to your points.
Thank you, Marcus, and good morning, everyone. I'll try and be short. I have the presentation. I hope they will be shared in the conference proceedings, so you can read some of the detail there. Maybe just to start, I would like to stress that for us, the model about volunteering, when we talk about relief or development, is very much about building strong national societies of Red Cross and Red Crescent around the world. So it's really about local volunteers first and foremost. And I would say that probably 99.9% of all our volunteering is done in all the countries around the world that we work in, the 187 member national societies. And there's only a very tiny fraction that involves volunteers working in another country. It does happen, and I'll say more about that now. And it happens in emergencies, where we work with a model from local to global, where volunteers are the first on the spot, local volunteers, but if a disaster is quite big, maybe the neighboring country comes to help. And there we see the examples of South volunteering. And I've been in many postings around the world where you could see the immediate beneficial effect of that. If there is an earthquake in El Salvador, it is the Mexicans, the Guatemalans, the Hondurans, the Nicaraguans who are there to help first. And they speak the language, they know the culture, they're much better placed to provide that immediate support. But there are situations where we bring in tools from further afield, more specialized, and some of them include volunteers also. We have, of course, volunteers in development programs, and I'll say a bit more about that also. Exchange, youth programs, development, community development programming. And again, it can be from the north to the south, it can be south to south, and interestingly, also increasingly from the south to the north. If you want to work around, let's say, migration issues in Europe, it helps to reach out to communities if you can bring out volunteers from the countries of origin to help you get access to those communities, have a first entry, and so forth. So all that to say that, in our view, volunteering, and when we talk about international volunteering, it has to be a two-way process where both sides give and receive and learn. And if you do that well, if you get it right, it can be a win-win. But I think there are some pitfalls, and we'll come to some of those also. Last year was a busy year for us in terms of volunteering. We've done a lot of work, not only because it was the European Year of Volunteering, but also it was the International Year plus 10. So we've worked within our Red Cross Red Crescent movement, also with other partners. We had a big conference with UNV in Budapest a couple of months ago. We've done a lot of work on the legal framework for volunteering. And I'll share with you some reports which you can find on our website also. We did some work on the legal framework for volunteering in emergencies. Actually, legal research done for free by 5 legal firms in Australia, France, Brazil, Qatar, and Indonesia, looking in detail at the legislation for how volunteers work there, whether you are a local volunteer or somebody coming in. And comparing that with notes from other legal studies that we were doing around international disaster response law, provided an input for a toolkit for national societies. So one of the legacies for us is to start working now with national societies of Red Cross, Red Crescent, to implement that and to strengthen their legal base and to advocate with their authorities for better protection. I'll come back to that also. Let me say a few words about the value of volunteers. And yesterday we had some discussions around that. We earlier, actually towards the end of 2010, we started doing a value study based on the ILO manual, and then also triangulating that with research that we had as part of our internal reporting, if you like. And we found that for Europe, we were able to put figures to this. It was challenging, definitely. We worked with an external company to do this well. But the figures that we got, we can be quite confident about, and you'll see them here. I won't go through them, but here in Europe, our volunteer force within the Red Cross is about the size of the population of Estonia, and about $1 billion US. So that's more or less comparable to the budget of ECHO, I think, the annual budget, more or less. Importantly, here in Europe, we see something about the staff ratio between the ratio between staff and volunteers. So we are able to draw figures, but of course there is a lot more behind it. And when we talk about value of volunteers, we only talk about the work that they do, not the impact that they have. So if we train in Europe 4 million first aiders every year, how many lives do we save, and what is the figure that you put to that? Impossible to tell. The social capital that we build, the social cohesion that we promote, and so on. But we can get figures about how much do we invest in volunteering, and what is the output? How many people do we serve, and can we use that for analyzing our figures around the world? So this is the global picture, 13.1 million people, and a GDP impact, if you like, of $6 billion US worth of services every year. We can see that, on average, globally, 1 staff for every 20 volunteers, and you'll see at the bottom in which areas they work. Now, we've used these categories because they fit with our internal strategy, but you might come up with other groupings, of course. Now, interestingly, if you start comparing it for the world, you see different figures, and you see that, as I mentioned in this group, or in this room yesterday, we see a ratio between staff and volunteers that varies from 1 to 11 in the US and Canada to something as high as 1 for every 430 volunteers in Southeast Asia. What does that tell us? Well, we'll need to analyze further what that means. Is it because they run different programs, or is it because they do something extremely well in volunteer management in Southeast Asia, or is there something else at play? And can we then start looking also at the effectiveness and the quality, and maybe come up with good practice and guidance? So for us, this whole exercise is very important because it helps us, first of all, to position ourselves and to say to partners, this is who we are and this is what we can do for you, and these are the people that we can mobilize. But it also gives us, I think, arguments to sit down with a Minister of Finance or with a local mayor and tell them, this is what we can do and this is the impact that we can achieve for you. But, as was mentioned in the room here yesterday also, not everything that counts can be measured. I think that's extremely important. Let's not make the mistake that we start measuring only and therefore focus only on that. There are a lot of additional and sometimes even hidden values that we should celebrate as part of what it means to be volunteering. And I'd like to give a few examples. The woman that you see on the right is Hortense. She's from Cameroon. She was a commercial sex worker and has become a peer educator, and later on has used her skills also to become to find another job. She was not only a very effective peer educator because she knew what she was talking about, she was trusted by the target community. And I think that's extremely important. Similarly, I think about volunteers I met in Belarus some months ago, Nikolai and Irene, who were injecting drug users. And they were involved in a needle exchange program. Yes, you can talk about the value of volunteering, but what is the value of the dignity, of the confidence, of the empowerment? Very hard to express in figures. Let me move on to volunteering in emergencies. We have little time. Just a few days ago, we launched an advocacy report about volunteering in emergencies, and I've got it here. You can find it on the internet also. It's really about these 3 main topics: protection, promotion, and recognition of volunteers. And if you look at the call to action that we made to governments, we met for the international conference just a few days ago with all the governments, representatives of the world. We made a very specific call to action regarding volunteering. The first part, you will see very much resembles what we have discussed over the last day. I think many of the elements here you will see in the PAVE document, which we fully support, of course. The second part is more about volunteering in emergencies, and it's a bit more specific. And I'd just like to highlight 2 or 3 things. I think one of the issues is, how can authorities, local authorities, whether it's here in Europe or in Africa or in Asia, make better use of volunteers already in their planning. When we do contingency planning, disaster preparedness planning, volunteers need to be built into the thinking. They're not just target group, they are resources. Secondly, insurance, extremely important. We have heard stories of volunteers dying, getting injured. We have the same experience. And it's absolutely essential that every volunteer is not only well trained, has the security training and knows and understands the job, but also has insurance in case things go wrong. Now that's not always the case, and we've launched a global scheme where volunteers can get a minimum level of insurance for 1 Swiss francs per year, which is not a lot here in Europe, but still for many of our Red Cross societies around the world, that's still a barrier. So we need to make sure that in programs that we support, that insurance is there also. Second point, safer access. Unfortunately, volunteers at the front line get exposed to real danger, and I think for us, important that they are recognized as independent and humanitarian and working on the basis of needs alone. So for us, that principle is extremely important as part of their security, but still we see that at times access is a real issue. It also works another way, where volunteers not always have access to people in need, and here in Europe we're actively campaigning to get recognition from governments that volunteers can work with migrants regardless of their legal status, whether they have documents or not, whether they're here in Europe legally or not. For us, that doesn't matter. If there is a humanitarian need, we want to address it, we want to have access to those people. Unfortunately, still in some cases, this is a criminal offense if you work with undocumented migrants. So we will keep advocating for that. And finally, on this one, psychological support. If I think about the work that the Norwegian Red Cross volunteers did earlier this year after the attacks in Norway, you can imagine they were involved not only in the immediate search and rescue and finding many dead young people and injured ones, and then having to comfort family and relatives and friends, but also working on later with them. That's a demanding job, but it also means that they themselves need psychosocial support before, during and after. Final point, and this is very much the last slide. We are involved in the EVAC pilot project. It's run by a number of our national societies. It is about developing a good practice model, and it is a pilot. We are focusing on deploying young people either before or after disasters, so not right in the hot zone, if you like, with a lot of emphasis on their training and recruitment. And obviously, by the time they come back in November next year, we want to draw the lessons learned, and we want to give final recommendations to EVAC. For us, some of the recommendations are already clear, and we've made them before during the consultation. It's important that there is no duplication of efforts. It's important that this program does not do what others are already doing and maybe doing better. So complementarity, coherence. For us, maybe the most important thing, it has to be about skills transfer and capacity building, not replacing local volunteers, as we've heard from quite a few other people here before. It should, in our view, only be guided by the needs, as Ancho has mentioned. And I would like to see, and that's a personal opinion, whether we could be a bit more innovative in things like this. Last week I was attending a demonstration by a group called Crisis Commons, looking at virtual volunteering, and groups like Geeks for Haiti, computer people, hackers that get involved in humanitarian work. They don't leave their computer, they stay at home, but they can provide an important role. There are many, many different ways in which people can volunteer without actually crossing the border. And I think it would be good to look a bit more at the innovative sides of this also. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And